When my wife was visiting her father, I had a suspicion that she might be cheating or maybe not. Maybe I was just paranoid at the time. Before she left, though, one of the boys told me Mommy said, "We have another daddy." Oh, what do you mean, buddy? When did Mom say this to you? When you were at work? She was kissing him in your bed. I don't like the man in your bed, Daddy. Right then and there, I knew my wife was cheating on me. I had no idea at first, but she has been a little distant. But I just thought it was because of a little stress with finances. But the fact that my son told me, heartbreaking, and instructing my son to call another man daddy, didn't sit well with me. So when my wife got back from visiting her father, what did I do? What any husband who knows his wife is cheating does, well, at least in my situation. I told her that the marriage was over, and that she could sleep in our guest bedroom until she found somewhere else to live. I told her that I was filing for divorce the next morning. Then, she had some little outbursts about how can I let her go. I asked, "How can you ask a question like that? My son said you were kissing another man in my house, in our bedroom. That's why I can let you go." She said she didn't care if I was filing for divorce. She says, "I will fight for custody of our sons." I said, "Okay, but I will fight to have custody as well. The worst that can happen is we share custody, and the house is in my name, and I will fight to keep it." She said, "You won't win though." I laughed at her, and she stormed off to the guest bedroom. I just noted that she took all of her clothes with her, which is fine by me. I said that was okay too. So here we are now. Wife has moved into the guest room until further notice. I have to stay strong for the boys. My wife, well, she is a lost cause, but they are my boys. The next day, I called a lawyer and asked him about filing for divorce and told him, based on what my son told me, I wanted to consult about filing for divorce because I suspect my wife is cheating. The lawyer said, "I am sorry to hear about this. However, I can't say much on the phone without knowing more details." I said, "Okay, can I come to your office tomorrow morning?" "Sure." I came to his office the next morning, and I told him everything that happened. Everything my wife said, everything my son said. The lawyer just listened intently. When I was done talking, he said, "Okay, if your wife is indeed cheating, as you suspect she is because you proposed divorce before your wife proposed, by law in this state, we can file for a no-fault divorce." I asked, "What does no-fault divorce mean?" He said, "Well, it means both parties agree to the divorce. There's no reason given. Usually after you file for a no-fault divorce, you and your wife will get your own lawyers involved and fight out custody or visitation for the children." Okay, I understood. Now, if she is cheating and you wanted to file for a divorce just because of this reason, then, I asked, what did he mean by that? The lawyer told me that in order to prove her guilty of adultery or infidelity, we have to find proof that my wife was indeed cheating with another man. Proof like finding condoms in your wife's purse, or you find evidence in your home that your wife is cheating, or perhaps getting pictures of my wife kissing another man. So, I asked the attorney, I need to get proof that she is cheating. My son's confession is not enough. He says, unfortunately, your son's confession that your wife kissed another man isn't enough in court. You will need more evidence than that. I say, so I need to catch her in the act. He says, yeah, something like that. He says, have you thought of getting a hidden camera? If it is just proof that she kissed him, then maybe just the confession will be enough for you to get custody of your sons. If not full custody, then limited visitation with supervised visits at first, or 50-50 custody. I then asked the attorney, what about my house? Can I keep my home? It's in my name. I pay the mortgage on it. And I don't plan on letting her get the house. I had the house before we were married. Her name is not on the deed. He says, unfortunately, your wife will probably get the house in the divorce settlement. He says that considering you have no hard evidence that she has been cheating other than your son says your wife kissed another man in your bedroom, the court would look upon it as a 50-50 split for custody of the children, and your wife taking possession of the marital home. I flat out asked the attorney, what do I have to do to keep my house and keep my kids? He says, with no hard evidence of her cheating, and with your wife obviously wanting to keep the house, and also take custody of the children, with limited visitation for you. The only thing you can do is hire a private investigator to find out if she has been cheating on you. I said, well, I have to go through all that just to prove she cheated, keep custody of my kids, my house, and other assets I own. So she gets to cheat and keep my assets. He says, well, it is not like she will never see your children again. She will still get visitation, and many wives who cheat keep their marriages together because they don't want to lose their kids or lose them to just visitation. They end up trying to work it out with counseling with the spouse they cheated on. But most of the time it doesn't work out. They end up spending thousands of dollars for nothing in time. I thanked the attorney for his time, left the office, and drove back home. My next step was to call a private investigator to find out what I was looking at price-wise. I found a private investigator who claimed to be one of the best in town. I set up an appointment to come in late that afternoon to discuss what I need him to do and why. When I met with the private investigator, he asks, why do you suspect your wife is cheating? I tell him, my son told me that mom was kissing another man in our bedroom, and he was labeled the other daddy. He says, have you had other suspicions that she was cheating? I told him, not really, but when my son said that to me, I knew then it was more concrete. After you said that, he says, do you need for me to obtain information on your wife? I said yes. Do you have any other children besides the son who told you the incident? I answered yes. Do they both live in the same house with you? Yes. What is your wife's name? Susan. What is her age? 33 years old. Is she employed outside of the home, or does she stay at home with your sons? She stays at home with our sons most of the time, but she does have a part-time job. I give him the address of where she works. He then says, okay, what I will do is have a couple of my team members do some surveillance on your home, your wife, and your wife's job. I said, okay, whatever it takes to prove she's cheating on me. I will do it. He gets everything together for me at this point, including the total cost, which was $4,100. If I remember correctly, and he says, call your wife right now, tell her you are going out of town for a couple of days, but make sure she doesn't know where you are going. So, I pick up my phone and call my wife, and tell her that my job is sending me away for a week for a training class in Boston. I am not going to Boston. I am just telling her that. To my surprise, her response was okay, just okay. I then asked the private investigator what I should do next. He says, go home and pack like you are really leaving. So, I go home and pack like I am leaving for a week, and I arrive back at the private investigator's office. About an hour later, we sit down and go through the information. He says, I will be back in touch with you tomorrow. He calls me at the hotel I am staying at the next day, and tells me that his investigators were able to obtain some evidence of my wife meeting up with another man for dinner. And there's a photo of them kissing each other. I said, no way. How did they manage to do that? He says, we have people everywhere who work for us. And then he gives me all the details about where she was at this time, what she wore, everything. I became very emotional when I heard this news, but it felt good that I was getting the evidence. I need to prove that she was cheating. They had obtained photos of her going to his house, walking out of his house hand in hand, and even one time leaving my kids unattended. Her leaving the kids made me furious, but also was ammunition for me to get full custody of the kids. What was she thinking? A week goes by and I meet up with the private investigator to get the evidence him and his team has gathered. I'm holding the envelope in my hands, and I can't wait to look at it. It took just a week for me to get what I was wanting. It seems she sprung into action with her boyfriend when she knew I was leaving for Boston, but it's been worth the wait. Inside the envelope are photos of her going out with this man who is not me. She is doing everything with this man, going to his house, kissing him, walking hand in hand with him. All the while, even on one occasion, leaving my kids unattended, still can't believe it. After getting the information from the private investigator, I then call my attorney back and ask, when can I meet him? He says, I can come in tomorrow morning. I get to his office and show him all of the evidence the private investigator and his team gathered. I asked him, will this help me keep my house and get full custody of the kids and prove that my wife is indeed cheating? He says, absolutely. This is all I needed to hear to get compensation for what your wife did. I cannot thank the private investigators enough, who, by the way, are also licensed attorneys themselves. So, they knew how to get the best evidence possible. The attorney then tells me that it could take up to 6 months or more before getting a settlement agreement or court-ordered divorce decree. After listening to everything, my attorney explained, I just want it over with as soon as possible. With my wife being involved with another man, there's no need in waiting anymore. I am very thankful for not only finding out about her infidelity, but hiring someone who knows what he's doing and making sure she gets punished financially and not get my assets that I have worked so hard for. I don't want anything from her. We have only been married for 6 years. I don't want to waste any more time with her. Bad enough. I still have to live under the same roof until the divorce, but I still have to remain strong for my boys. Thank you, Reddit community, for letting me share my story. Update 1. My attorney tells me that my divorce will be sooner than I expected, and my wife is trying to get me to go to counseling. I have declined that offer of counseling. I told her, the only thing I want is to be a good parent to my boys. I told her, I don't need counseling. You brought another man into my home while I was at work. You cannot possibly change my mind. Since then, she has made herself scarce and my boys are starting to ask a lot of questions. It just breaks my heart. I will try to come back with another update, possibly regarding the divorce. Thank you for taking the time to watch and listen to this Reddit relationships video. Another one of these crazy revenge cheating stories. Husband is blind and his wife has an affair and gets pregnant. Well, he was hell-bent on revenge. Well, I thought my life was content. I had a beautiful wife, Joanne. We had been high school sweethearts, and we started on this journey together, building a wonderful life. We had 2 incredible kids, Sonny, a soccer prodigy at just 9 years old, and Katie, our 6-year-old little artist who could draw like a young Picasso. I worked as a software developer at a reputable tech company and Joanne was a nurse at the local hospital. We were both well respected in our fields, and the money was more than enough to keep us comfortable. Our weekends were filled with family outings, picnics in the park, hiking trips, and even the occasional luxury vacation. Joanne and I still had date nights every Friday, just like we did when we were dating. We'd go to our favorite Italian restaurant where the owner knew us by name and always had a bottle of our preferred wine ready. Our social circle was large and tight-knit. We were to go to host for Thanksgiving dinners and summer barbecues, and our home was always filled with laughter and love. Joanne was the glue that held everything together. She was the one who remembered birthdays, anniversaries, and even the little things like the names of your friends' pets. But even in this idyllic life, there were small cracks that I chose to ignore. Joanne started spending more time on her phone, even during our sacred date nights. She'd laugh at text messages and quickly lock her phone when I glanced her way. I told myself it was nothing, that after 9 years of marriage, we were still solid as ever. Well, things would change, and they would change rather quickly. The first red flag that appeared was subtle. Joanne, who was usually so attentive, started becoming increasingly engrossed in her phone. It wasn't just a frequency with which she checked it. It was the way her face lit up when she read certain messages. I didn't want to be that husband, the one who snoops, who doubts, who lets jealousy cloud his judgment. So, I told myself it was work-related or perhaps a new friendship that was bringing her joy. After all, we were both busy professionals. It was natural for work and social lives to interact in complex ways. But then came the late nights at the hospital. Joanne started taking on more shifts. Or so she said. They're short-staffed, she'd tell me, and I can't let my team down. It was a reasonable explanation, and the extra income she mentioned didn't hurt either. But my instincts were telling me something else. She would come home exhausted, but her eyes lacked the usual fatigue that follows a grueling 12-hour shift. The mysterious phone call soon followed. She'd step out onto the porch or lock herself in the bathroom, talking quietly, which I couldn't make out. When I asked her who she was talking to, she dismissed it as work calls or conversations with her sister, Susan. But she had a certain ringtone set up for Susan, and this wasn't it. Then, there was the sudden, almost obsessive focus on her appearance. Joanne had always been beautiful, but she never really went overboard with her looks. However, she started spending more time in front of the mirror, applying makeup even on her days off. She bought new clothes, stylish, youthful outfits that seemed designed to impress. She even joined the gym and hired a personal trainer. All these changes taken individually could be easily explained. Was this some type of crisis, perhaps? A newfound sense of self? But together, they form a pattern, a series of dots that I couldn't connect, which kept nagging at me day and night. I considered confronting her, laying all my cards on the table, but I hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if this was all in my head? I couldn't risk damaging the beautiful life we have built over unfounded suspicions. Fast forward a few months, and the signs became too glaring to ignore. One day while I was at work, I thought of a romantic gesture. It had been a while since I had surprised Joanne at work, and I figured a bouquet of her favorite roses would be a nice touch. I left work early, picked up the most beautiful arrangement I could find, and drove to the hospital where she worked. When I arrived, I was greeted by her coworker, Nancy, who seemed surprised to see me. She told me I just missed Joanne. She had a doctor's appointment. A doctor's appointment. She hadn't mentioned anything about it to me. I think Nancy left the flowers on Joanne's desk and walked back to my car. But instead of driving back to work, I found myself doing something I never thought I'd do. I decided to follow her. Once, I activated the location sharing feature on her phone, something we'd both done years ago, for safety reasons, and saw on the app where her car was. When I found her car, I stayed put until she left the facility. When she left, I followed, maintaining a safe distance to avoid detection. The drive seemed to stretch on forever, but finally she pulled into what looked like a newly built subdivision. I parked my car at a reasonable distance away and watched, my heart sinking deeper with each passing second. There he was, a man I'd never seen before, waiting at the doorstep. Joanne got out of her car and embraced and kissed him. I felt like a complete and utter fool. We had not been intimate in months, but I didn't think it would ever come to this. But the moment that truly twisted the knife, that made my world come crashing down, is the fact that she grabbed this guy's hand and placed it on her belly was shattering for me. After that gesture, I thought to myself, she is pregnant. And from the look of their intimacy, I had every reason to believe the child wasn't mine. I took out my phone and snapped a few discreet photos. The days following the discovery were a blur of emotion and activity. I was shattered, but I knew that falling apart wouldn't serve me well. I needed to be strategic, calculated, and most importantly, discreet. The first thing I did was hire a private investigator. Me just taking photos on my phone wouldn't be enough, I thought. It probably was, but I didn't think it would be sufficient. I found one who specialized in marital cases, ensuring that they would know exactly what evidence would be most effective in court. The private investigator went to work right away, telling Joanne and her mystery man, capturing photos of their secret rendezvous. Even when she was supposed to be at work, she was cheating on me with this guy. He even got pictures of her going to a clinic with their mystery man. While the private investigator was gathering evidence on Joanne's betrayal, something told me to get paternity tests on my kids. Well, the kids were mine. That was a relief. With the help of the private investigator, we managed to obtain a paternity test. The results were confirmed that I was not the father of the child Joanne was carrying. I was devastated, but it was a crucial piece of evidence added to the rest. I really don't know how the private investigator pulled that off, because you can't just get access to someone's medical records, but I am grateful for that, no matter how he got it. Next, I consulted a divorce lawyer. I presented all the evidence I had gathered, and the lawyer assured me that it was more than enough to ensure a favorable outcome, but he didn't make any promises. We began the process of getting my financials in order, moving assets, and setting up separate accounts. I even established trust funds for Sonny and Katie, making sure they would be taken care of, no matter what happened between their mother and me. While the lawyer worked on the legal aspects, I started making subtle changes at home. I became more involved in the kids' lives, attending every soccer game, every art class, ensuring that I was a parent they could rely on. I documented everything, knowing that this could possibly strengthen my case for custody. I also began to distance myself emotionally from Joanne, preparing myself for the life-altering confrontation that was to come. It was difficult to share a bed, a home, and even casual conversations with someone I knew had betrayed me so deeply, but every time I felt myself faltering, I thought of the ultimate payback that awaited her. It was the fuel that kept me going. By the time our 10th wedding anniversary rolled around, everything was in place. The evidence was irrefutable. My financials were secure, and my lawyer was ready to pounce the moment I gave the signal. Joanne had blinders on. She was busy planning a lavish anniversary party, inviting friends and family to celebrate a decade of what she still believed was a happy marriage. The night of our 10th wedding anniversary arrived. Joanne had gone all out, renting a beautiful venue and hiring a caterer to serve gourmet food. A live band played softly in the background as our friends and family mingled, sipping champagne and reminiscing about the good times we'd all shared. As the evening wore on, Joanne signaled that it was time for the toast. She picked up her champagne glass and tapped it lightly with a spoon to get everyone's attention. That's when I knew it was time. I have an announcement. Stepping forward and taking the microphone from her hand, the room fell silent almost immediately with all the eyes on me. I held up my phone where I had prepared a slideshow of all the evidence, photos, videos, and the paternity test results. Joanne has been having an affair, I said, pausing just for a second, and she's pregnant with another man's child. With that, I set the microphone down and walked out of the venue, leaving a room full of stunned faces and a wife whose world had just come crashing down. The days following the reveal were a whirlwind of legal procedures, emotional conversations, and life-altering decisions. My lawyer filed the divorce papers immediately, and given the mountain of evidence we had, the proceedings were swift and decidedly in my favor. Joanne attempted to contest, but it was futile. It was 50-50 custody with the kids, and due to the prenup agreement we had clauses specifically about infidelity. Joanne walked away with nothing. She moved in with the man she had been seeing, apparently convinced that their love story would have a happy ending, but reality soon caught up with her. Within a few months, he left her, citing the overwhelming drama and scrutiny that came with being the other man in a high-profile divorce. Joanne was left alone, pregnant, and facing the consequences of her actions, But she got herself together, because remember, we had 50-50 custody of the kids, and she needed a place to call home for her and the kids. As for me, my primary focus shifted to Sunny and Katie. I took on a more flexible work schedule to be there for them, attending every school event, helping with homework, and doing all the things that a committed parent should do. I wanted to ensure that despite the turmoil, their lives would be as stable and loving as possible. So now, I am rebuilding my life one day at a time. All I care about now is being a good father to my kids. Well, this is just my opinion. So many people are bent on revenge in these cheating stories, I get it. Sometimes the spouse committing adultery can sometimes spin the narrative, and you want to get in front of it, understood. But in this case, they spent money on a wedding anniversary. No way I would have done that. Fuck that. Don't spend money just to expose someone. Use that money for something else. If you want to expose someone, use the power of the internet, social media, emails, text messages, however you do it. Don't waste resources for that shit. But he did catch me off guard with the prenup. I didn't expect that. Well done, until next time. My name is Paul, a proud, honest blue-collar guy, clocking in at 52 years old. Grew up with the belief that hard work and dedication were the keystones to a good, comfortable life. For the better part of my life, that belief held water. I spent years building up a successful car repair business right in the heart of Georgia, and I reckon I did well for myself. Owned a neat house in Fulton County, had a reliable circle of buddies. And at the end of the day, there was always a cold beer waiting in my fridge. Couldn't really ask for more. Then there's my wife, Shannon. We'd always joke how she was the brains, and I was a brawn of our little duo. She graduated from the University of Georgia with a Bachelor of Science degree, a smart cookie. That one, her passion for caring for others led her to become a nurse practitioner. And she's been serving at a nearby hospital ever since. Watching her dedication and commitment to her work was something that I admired deeply. She'd come home exhausted yet there was always a satisfaction in her eyes. The kind you get when you know you've made a difference. We were young and full of dreams. When we said our I do's 22 years ago, those first years, there was something filled with laughter, plans for the future. And a love that felt as comfortable as an old one in pair of boots. We were joined at the hip, almost two kids against the world. I'd fix cars during the day. She'd heal folks. And at the end of the day, we'd come home to each other. Over the years, we built a stable and comfortable life, a life that I was damn proud of. She was my rock. And I like to believe I was hers. We were more than just a couple. We were a team. Well, as I would soon find out, our team was about to be dismantled. Our daily grind was like clockwork, a rhythm we fell into over the years. My day started early with the smell of engine oil and the sound of turning gears. I had my loyal crew at the shop, and together we breathed life into old jalopies and finicky luxury cars alike. Shannon's work started a bit later, but lasted long into the night, filled with the hum of hospital corridors and a gratitude of patients she aided. Despite the long hours, she had a kind of fire in her that kept her going. We had our differences, but we found common ground in hobbies. We both enjoyed gardening, hiking, and the occasional cooking battle in our humble kitchen. Our circle of friends was small, but tight-knit, filled with folks from our community, fellow mechanics, hospital workers, and some old pals from college. Both of us knew that working hard was a means to an end. We were dreaming of a comfortable retirement where the days were long and the worries were few. We fantasized about finally getting the RV and setting off on a cross-country trip, just the two of us exploring every nook and cranny of this beautiful country. To make that dream a reality, we were diligent about contributing to our 401k plans. Every month a chunk of our earnings would go towards it. I would put a chunk in mine, and she would put a chunk of money in her 401k. We were practical folks, and we knew that planning for the future was just as important as living in the present. Well, I had no idea that 401k was about to become a thorn in my side, and the future we were so eagerly planning was going to look vastly different than we imagined. I'll never forget that day as I was manning the booth for my repair shop. I saw one of Shannon's coworkers, Sue, walking over. She had a friendly face, always had a kind word or a funny anecdote from the hospital to share. That day she seemed a bit off, but I brushed it off as exhaustion from the long hospital shifts. We chatted about this and that, the weather, the fair, the latest hospital gossip. Then out of the blue, Sue mentioned something that made my heart rate rise instantly. She casually brought up a certain someone my wife had met at a conference, how they seemed to hit it off, how Shannon had been glowing since then. She must have seen the confusion on my face, quickly backpedaling, saying it was probably nothing, just a harmless crush, but I couldn't shake off what she said. The seed of doubt had been planted, and like a bad weed, it was growing fast. Was my wife, Shannon, involved with someone else? Disbelief, confusion, and a kind of gut-wrenching turmoil started brewing inside me. The woman I spent half my life with, who I trusted, was now a question mark. It was like I was staring at a jigsaw puzzle with the piece missing. I started second-guessing everything she did, her late-night shifts, the unexplained absences, her newfound secrecy around her phone, but darn it, I didn't want to believe it. Not Shannon, not my wife, but this feeling wouldn't let me be. It was eating me up from the inside. Finally, I decided to confront her. On this day, we were in our backyard, tending to our rose bushes. As the nervousness set in, I asked her straight out about the guy from the conference. She was like, "What are you talking about?" I then told her, "Your coworker told me that you were a little too close with this person you were talking to at the conference, and you might have a crush on him." She got defensive right away, and said she was lying. She has never gotten that angry about anything. After that, it was pure silence. I didn't stay in the garden with her. I left and didn't tell her where I was going. I drove around for a while, trying to gather my thoughts to figure out what was going on. Why would Sue come up to me and tell me that? But my wife said she was lying. After about an hour or so, I went back home and my wife was sitting on the couch on her phone. She didn't even greet me, which was really strange. Didn't even ask where I had gone. Was I all right? Nothing. The next morning, I went to my shop and talked to one of the managers that worked for me. He was a long-time employee and was about the same age as me. I opened up to him and told him how my wife reacted to her coworker's remark about her getting too close to a guy at a conference. He said that might be a red flag. He said most of the time, people who don't have anything to hide will usually try to find out why she said that, and being defensive right away isn't a good sign. The rest of my workday was horrible after he said that. I couldn't get it out of my mind, but I wasn't going to say anything else to my wife about it, but I wasn't done. I was going to be more observant to see if there was any truth to this. And I wasn't going to ask Sue again. Over the next few weeks, my wife's behavior started to shift a little bit. I didn't confront her about it. Ever since I asked her about the guy she met at the conference, she's been a tad bit distant. It's been 3 weeks since that day, and we haven't been intimate. The hobbies we shared came to a screeching halt. Fast forward 2 days, and I go to open the shop one morning, and a woman greets me with an envelope and screams at me and tells me, "Tell your wife to stay the hell away from my husband." Man, you should have seen my face. I go in, I open the envelope immediately and boom, photos of my wife kissing another man, being intimate with this man in someone's house. Pictures of my wife in her uniform, sitting with this man in a park. Also inside was a phone number. I called it. It was a woman who just left. She apologized for screaming at me. She said she was angry at her husband. She informed me she hired a private investigator to follow her husband. They have 3 kids. She said, "I thought you should know what your wife was doing, man." I was devastated, angry, and heartbroken at the same time. My longtime employee came in about 20 minutes later, and I asked him to cover the shop for me today. And I left. I went home. My wife wasn't home. I made copies of everything that woman gave me. Once that was done, I packed a few bags and headed to the rental property my brother owns. Once I got settled in, I went to see a divorce lawyer. I didn't waste any time. I handed over the evidence I had and told the divorce attorney to file for divorce based on infidelity. And I told him, I am going after everything. I could alimony her 401k. Anything I could get alimony was a stretch. I believe she made almost $120,000 per year as a senior nurse practitioner. I didn't make that. Although I had my own business, my salary wasn't that high. Weeks went by with very little communication from my wife. But when she received those divorce papers, she was a totally different person, calling me names, telling me I didn't measure up anymore. A month and a half had passed by before the divorce hearing, and she was a hoot. Let me tell you, screaming at me in the courtroom, the bailiff had to calm her down. Well, the divorce didn't go her way. I ended up getting alimony in the amount of $900 per month for 9 years. And lo and behold, I took half of her 401k in the amount of $100,000. My salary was $60,000 per year, and she made double that. I will also get half of the equity of the house we own when it's sold. And I was lucky enough to keep the rental only because it was in a trust that my brother controlled. My ex-wife's AP got hammered in his divorce. As I was told, he had to pay $4,000 per month in alimony for 11 years. He lost the house, and she gets part of his retirement. They were married for 24 years, but they have been together for 28 years. I would have gotten more from my ex-wife's 401k, but she took some of the money out, which was stupid. You never take out money from your 401k early. You will get hit with a 10% early withdrawal penalty and subject to tax by the IRS. About 9 months after the divorce, we ended up selling the house, and I got another $157,000. I am a little overweight, but I have started working out again and taking it one day at a time. My friends have been trying to set me up with dates. I am just not ready for that yet. Anyway, that's my story. I have been wanting to send my story to Tony for a while now. I just finally gotten around to it. One quality I, 40, admired in my wife, 44, was her enthusiasm for holidays. She said whenever she gathered with others to celebrate, it felt warm, fuzzy, and magical. Easter was no exception. She loved dyeing eggs and taking the kids on Easter egg hunts. Even though our twins grew to be too old for Easter egg hunts, she maintained her holiday routine. In preparation for Easter, she collected and boiled our chickens' eggs, dyed them, usually with the help of our sons, and used them in the egg hunt for the younger kids at the church. Besides basically hosting the church event, she also planted a large combination of daffodils, crocus, and hyacinth seedlings. She had at least 200 flowers ready for sale 9 days before Easter. She transported them with her econoline from the grow tent in the backyard to her selling spot on the corner by the supermarket. I helped her with this project every year, including last year's Easter holiday, when unbeknownst to me she met AP. There were no clues that she was communicating with another romantic partner. She would just so casually tell me she was talking to her mother. I did not get along with my MIL. She drove me crazy, but I tolerated her for my wife and children's sake. By this Easter, our twins were 15 years old, so they didn't exactly jump up to go to Grandma's house, thank goodness. I had a reason to stay home now. How could I have known I couldn't trust my wife when she told me she was talking to her mother or going to see her mother? On this Easter Sunday, my wife already had the eggs hidden for the children to find in the grass and trees behind the church. The teenagers wanted to stay home, and since my wife told me her mother was going to be at the church, probably close to my wife, I elected to stay home. About 30 minutes after my wife left, her mom called the house phone. I was a little concerned, so I answered it. It became clear that she never intended to join the Easter egg hunt this year. She was calling to see if my wife could come over after church to clip her toenails. I shuddered and hung up. Since I distinctly remembered her telling me her mother would be there, my hunch told me something was up. I let my teenager stay home and went to the egg hunt. I spotted my wife standing alone, watching the children hunt for eggs. I walked over to her, and as soon as I greeted her, I saw panic in her eyes. She kept glancing at the church building, like she expected someone to come out any minute. She quickly asked me why I was there, but before I answered, she told me her mother would be back out from the restroom any minute, so I should go back home. I calmly and grudgingly told her that I already knew her mom wasn't here. Her face and neck turned red, and she started itching until she saw a man come out of the church and start heading towards us. She quickly told me the man headed our way was just a friend that wanted to date her, but she already told him she was married. I was confused and hardly had time to think before he asked me if I was the reason she ghosted him the past week. I said excuse me, and then told him she was my wife, and we were married for the past 19 years. He was immediately deflated, and told me they'd been seeing each other for a year. I was taken aback. It felt like the wind was knocked out of me. She told me that wasn't true, and that he'd been harassing her to the point where she considered calling the police. I just looked at her like she was crazy, and asked how that could have been happening without me knowing. AP called her a liar, and demanded she tell me about their plans for the future. When she covered her face, he grabbed her wrist to move her hand, and without thinking, I pushed him in an attempt to stop him from touching her. This resulted in us fighting. I remember getting a few punches in before I blacked out. When I came to, the police were there, and many of the egg hunting children were gone, left in a hurry with their families because of the brawl. I was seen in an ambulance, and it was concluded I had a concussion. The police told me what I already found out. My wife was cheating on me. The word got around fast from people that went to our church, and she was pretty much shunned by all of them. As far as I know, she was practically banned from ever stepping foot in that church again. I couldn't imagine my wife willingly seeing a man, even planning a future with him, all behind my back. It felt like a nightmare. It came to light that he had a child from a previous marriage, who was present at the egg hunt that my wife invited them to. AP told me that he was ending things with her, as well since he had no idea she was married. He mentioned that she begged him not to leave her, and said that she told him I was abusive, which was completely made up. It was disturbing to me how my wife could sabotage our entire family all by one idiotic decision. This was enough to end everything we had together as a family, and it broke my heart. The kids and I didn't deserve this. I read posts about this in the past, but since I never did anything to betray my wife's trust, discourage her, or disappoint her, I never thought she would have a reason to cheat on me. I was just dumb for failing to realize this would happen to me. OP, I am so sorry you and your sons had to go through this. I want you to know it was absolutely no fault of yours. She lied about you being abusive to make it look like she was only doing what any other battered woman would do. Leave the bad man and find a new love. The only problem is she didn't leave you, and you didn't deserve to be left. She just found a new love, lied, and pretended everything was fine to your face. She tried to justify leaving her family after 19 years by portraying you as a bad spouse. You must realize that this happens to men who least expect it every day, so you aren't dumb for failing to realize her deception. Just stay strong for your sons, and remember that you can make the best of this life change. Stay hopeful, and remain honest in your relationships. There are honest and good women out there who are looking for a respectable man. Get out there, be honest, and find as many things as you can to be passionate about. I wish you the best of luck in life. Now let's get into our second story for today. My wife and I were chefs in a gourmet kitchen in New York City. We knew each other for 14 years and were married for 9. We enjoyed every day together, working nearly identical shifts at the restaurant. Ratatouille was our favorite movie because our hats were identical. A year after the movie, I actually adopted 2 pet rats as a joke for my wife. She loved them. She told me months later she didn't know she could get so attached to rodents. Anyway, our relationship was great and full of imagination and happy times. After our passed away, we decided to conceive. When we struggled to do so, we took it as a sign to adopt. Our daughter's first birthday with us was her 8th. She had some emotional challenges that we worked through together, through honesty and patience. It felt like our family was strong and united. So when I got a phone call from the police 2 years later, I was extremely confused. I was at the grocery store with my daughter, and as far as I knew, my wife was working a shift at restaurant. The police informed me that she was at the police station, unharmed, but they wanted to ask me some questions. I was a little unsettled, and my mind raced until I got there. With our daughter under my sister's watch, the police started asking me questions like, "When did you find out what your wife was doing? And how long did you plot revenge against him?" All I would ask repeatedly, "What is going on? Where was my wife? What happened?" I had no idea what they were talking about, and after about an hour and a half of interrogation, they believed me. They verified that I was at the grocery store at the time of the attack on AP in his own home, while my wife was there having sex with him. He was stabbed by an intruder while he was in bed with her. The culprit was covered from head to toe and fled the scene. My wife was the one that called 911. I was terrified. I started crying uncontrollably. My wife cheated on me and experienced this traumatic event. Then I felt relieved that I was recorded at a different place during the attack, being the dedicated father I was determined to be. As I shopped for groceries, my wife was cheating on me. I felt so stupid, even though there was no way I could have known. Then the police told me this guy was in critical condition, and he was having an affair with more than 4 other women. My wife just happened to be there when someone else wanted revenge. They let me go, and I saw my wife waiting for me. She looked disturbed and restless. When she saw me, there was brief relief, followed by great sadness when she remembered she cheated on me. I walked right by her, refusing to speak. She followed me, crying and begging to talk about this. I told her we were over, and that I planned to start seeing other people immediately. I sarcastically told her she made an excellent choice for an affair partner, because he was very experienced. She admitted she was extremely stupid for sleeping with this guy, after they talked for about 2 months on a dating app, but that was all he would ever amount to in her life. She pretty much demanded that I forgive her, because she was worth it, and we already spent so many happy years together. I told her she ruined everything, just before I slammed my car door and drove home. I called my parents and sister came over to help me through this time, and tried to make our home environment happy for my daughter. Within 24 hours, I filed for divorce. She tried to come home that same day, and got into a fight with my parents when they refused to let her in. After some screaming, they actually managed to convince her to leave with just a few suitcases of her belongings. When our daughter saw her again, she told her she was very disappointed in her. Can you imagine that? Hearing that your 10-year-old adopted daughter is disappointed in you. After all we went through to adopt her, and worked through her emotional trauma, my wife let her down, and made her a little less hopeful. That was enough punishment in itself. But my wife was obviously divorced by me, so she lost her home, And then she was also fired from the restaurant. I told our boss that we worked for the past 12 years, what happened, and how our relationship ended in the worst way possible. She lied to me that day. She didn't have a shift to work. They decided this made her untrustworthy and fired her for it. She was so deflated and disappointed in her life's new path that she didn't fight for her job. She just accepted it. She's still living at her parents' without a job or plans for the future. My daughter and I have been quite the opposite, just hopeful and keeping ourselves busy. Besides work and school, we go hiking, camping, sailing, and travel to fun destinations. OP, I don't understand how your wife didn't think of her husband or daughter before doing this and stop dead in her tracks. I'm surprised every time I hear one of these stories that the spouse failed to have a moment of clarity where they decide not to destroy everything they built with a person they claim to love. It's hard to believe these cheaters even have normal emotions or might have understand what a relationship entails. They blow it, and once the trust and loyalty is gone, it's nearly impossible to recover. Things are never as they were before it happened, and it's always better to end the relationship. The emotional torment of staying together doesn't compare to the temporary adjustment of separation. At least in separation, there's newfound hope in the future, instead of worry and paranoia. I believe that you made all the right decisions, given your circumstances, and wish nothing but the best for you and your daughter. You're an inspiration to us all. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please